alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is a guest who I've been circling for some time. Welcome to the show, James Silverstein.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's good to finally chat with you again. I mean, I had you on of Mooks and Monsters a year ago or so, or more than that maybe, for one of the game episodes, and that was a good time. People should go back and check that out. But first off, tell people. After this episode, they should go back and check those episodes out, because right now, Conversation with James is about books. So, James, tell us a little bit about yourself and the books you've written.
Okay. I'm a writer of hard-boiled detective fiction. I also wrote for some role-playing games a while back. Back in 2004, I wrote for AEG Games. I wrote for their 7th Sea and Stargate lines. And then in 2016, I wrote and published a novel called Necropolis. I got in an anthology called Gable Heights, and this year I released The Case of the Scarlet Starlet, which is book 2 in the series that Necropolis started.
Well, cool. And those books, tell us a little bit about Necropolis.
So Necropolis is set in the series is set between the late 1940s and the late 1960s, in a world in which the Nazi occult experiments bore fruit, and they discovered how to raise the dead as both zombies and more intelligent ghouls. But it was too little too late. The Nazis still lost the war. But necromancy was kind of a genie that couldn't get put back in a bottle. And while all the nations of the world suddenly pounced on that technology, they also pretty immediately made it illegal. But just because something is illegal doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. The first book opens in Chicago in the late 1940s, where the undead are considered fifth-class citizens at best. They have no legal rights, and they kind of have their own ghetto in Chicago. The second book takes place in Hollywood, where there is rampant anti-undead sentiment, but one of the most popular movies of that year came out, and it was starring an undead. So the stories are very 1940s, 1950s hard-boiled detective, but they deal with this necromancy that's in the world.
Well, you're combining two things I have quite a soft spot for, especially necromancy, but I like hard-boiled fiction a little bit too, and quite a bit, I should say. And I especially, my favorite film in that genre is still the Double Indemnity.
Oh, Double Indemnity is great.
Oh, there's a lot of good stories in that genre, just in general. But that one is the best I've seen currently. I'm not much of a movie watcher though, so there you go. There are probably more out there that are really good that I've not devoured.
Oh, I could definitely give you a list.
I think Charlie Brown gave me a list at one point, but I seem to have forgotten because I'm terribly forgetful. Also, it was a huge list.
Well, yeah, there's a lot out there.
Yeah. I guess it's his name. He doesn't go by Charlie Brown in his books anymore. Whatever. Anyway, he goes by his pseudonym. But yeah. So these books, you've got a kind of twist on the noir kind of hard boiled stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I can only imagine that makes it it makes it even darker though, because the undead, they're not exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. I mean, the threat, so often in a hard-boiled story, the threat is of death. And now, in many cases, the threat is, well, I'm going to kill you, and then I'm going to reanimate you, and you'll be my slave you'll be my mindless slave forever. or I can do that to people you care about.
Oh, gross. Yeah, it's such a compelling but terrifying concept.
Yeah, yeah.
So, as far as the writing process, though, how do you go about writing your books? I mean, any particular techniques you use? How fast do you go? That kind of thing.
Well, okay. I have a relatively steady process. Up until recently, I've been very heavily a planner. I used to outline pretty much everything I wrote, and that became more important when writing mysteries and detective novels, because then third act, this crime gets discovered. I have to make sure that in earlier acts, I have that sort of portended or clues set in earlier or whatever. But as for the actual process, honestly, I carry around a notebook with me wherever I go, and anytime I think of anything that might be important to the story, into the notebook it goes. And then in the morning, I wake up, I consider what I'm going to be writing for the day. Often it's just chronologically what happens next in the book, but there are times that I'll wake up and I'll say, oh, I've got this really great idea for this one scene, or, oh, I really need to work on this character bit, and I'll kind of ponder it for half hour. Then in my apartment, I have 2 computers, and one of them is only for writing. It doesn't have anything on it that I can click on that would distract me. No movies, no Facebook, no anything. So I go there after I've kind of meditated on the work for an hour, I sit down, and then for half hour, I will just write. And I continue to put words on the page until I feel that I can't anymore. And I've learned not to force it beyond that, because if I force it beyond that, everything just turns to mush. But I'll just keep writing and writing, and even if something's wrong, I'll just leave it there. I'll just put a highlight mark on it, something that says, work on this later. Or if I hit a rut, I'll put in all caps in bold letters, make sure this clue appears, or insert witty banter here. But I just try to ride the momentum as best I can. And it's first draft. I'll edit it all later.
Yeah, good. That's a good technique for a lot of writers, and it sounds like you put it to good use yourself.
Yeah.
So do you have any? So it was pretty detailed though. Does the process go quickly for you? Or, I mean, how do you know? Because it sounds like not. I mean, obviously everyone works at their own pace, but it's but the half hour, an hour. That's actually a pretty good amount for a day for someone who's going to who has a day job going anywhere.
Yeah.
Which most people do. Let's be fair. And most people can't be me or aren't me. In fact, I'm the only me. I'm pretty sure. Well, not really, because I have a twin brother. Anyway, but most people can't be. Maybe there's 2 of me. But the point is, most people have jobs. Most people are busy people, and they, and the writing is something that has to get, at least time gets carved out for it.
Right.
And is that challenging at all? Do you have
well, I will
not
admit,
to dig too deep there, but
I will admit I do not have a day job, so it is easier for me. But the reason that I try to do it in the morning is so that there is a scheduled time for it.
Okay.
So that so that days that I'm not writing, days that I decide, I can't do this today, it actually feels like there's something missing in that half hour, and I'll feel better if I write. And even if it's not on the current novel, if it's like a short story that I want to submit somewhere, or if it's character work or something. And that's something I try to encourage in other people I talk to who are like, I want to write. I say, okay, well, carve out a half hour of your time and just write. And it doesn't have to be Shakespeare. It doesn't have to be, Asimov. It doesn't have to be anything. It's just there's this wonderful Ira Glass quote that's very long, so I'm not going to read it all. But it's all about how, like, when you first start writing, you know what you want to write, but you don't have the chops yet. Very few people do when they start. And Ira Glass says, you have to keep at it, and one day you will make that breakthrough, and you'll start developing your own style, and you'll start being able to put out the good stuff. And I encourage people, like, in the beginning, your stuff might not be great, but it's not going to get great unless you keep at it.
And that's good advice, yes, for just about anybody starting any kind of skill.
Yeah.
I mean, especially artistic arts. The arts are really taste-based. And I think I remember that Ira Glass quote, and I believe he mentioned at one point in it, in one of the parts you omitted, was that he's like, you start with taste. You have a good taste. Yeah. That's why you want to create stuff. But you're not going to be able to live up to it just yet. So don't worry about living up to it. Is the key.
Yeah.
You'll get there. And that's useful information for people who are new at stuff. I remember I don't remember how far along I was into writing when I heard that quote. And I thought it was really good, though. It was really useful at the time. So
yeah,
it was much earlier in my career at that point.
And, I know this is you asking questions, but I'll ask you one. Did you come to the point at one point early in your writing where you sat down and you looked at something you wrote and you're like, yeah, that's the good stuff right there?
It took a while. I started writing as a teenager, so that didn't really happen until I was maybe 19. I was 14 when I wrote my first book, I think. And when I was 19, I wrote a book that actually became the first 3 books of my Spells of the Curtain series, and I loved that. There were a couple other stories I really liked before that. I can't remember exactly when I sat down and reread something and said, "Oh no, that's awesome." Until the White Curtain was the working title. Now it's Court Mage is the name of the book. That's
to me just one of the best moments as a writer, when you can sit back and look down and at some of your stuff and go, yeah, I nailed that.
Yeah, it was sublime. It's a great feeling. And thanks for asking the question. It really did make me think. And it's weird, actually. I was just considering this the other day, because one of the other guests I've had on the show a while back was Zigzag Claiborne.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah, and he actually was the one who encouraged me to publish that series, to finish editing that book and publish it.
Oh, fantastic!
Years ago, yeah, it was kind of crazy. It was like, wow, I was just thinking about that today. I'm like, what happens if I don't talk to that guy at that point?
Yeah,
it was weird.
Yeah, for me, this will probably not surprise you at all. That was Dave Robeson.
Oh, of course, he's been on the show a couple times too. Oh, Dave's awesome.
Yeah, if it weren't for Dave, no, none of my stuff would have gotten published. None of it.
Yeah, sometimes you just need that push. What's up with that? Not all of us writers are cut from the cloth of just being enthusiastic, and that's an incredibly powerful ability. Yeah, that's one of those things Dave definitely has going for him, especially.
Yeah. Dave is a muse. He is an absolute muse for creative types. And now that I've said this, he's probably shaking his fist at me. But I'll live with that.
Of course, he's shaking his fist at you. That's what he'll do. But then he'll help you out some more. That's just
of course, because that's
So
I hope that every author out there has a Dave in their life, someone who can push them the right way.
Sometimes we all need a Dave.
Yep.
Oh, anyway, or whoever that is for whatever that Dave is called, may not be Dave. Anyway, we've said Dave too many times, so now it's time to roll on and ask you a little bit more about necromancy. I mean, you were keeping that the internal the nature of this in your stories. You're keeping the necromancy. You've been keeping. You say you keep the rules a little close to the chest in the first two books, right?
Yeah,
and the third book is
now.
So the secrets are yet to be revealed.
Right. Third book. Well, in the first two books, you generally just find out that there is some sort of scientific process that brings back the dead, and that if you there are certain protections that anyone who works in necromancy needs to take, and if you do not take them, you will be driven insane. The power will bake your mind. But in the third book, which I'm working on now, the main character is a necromancer, and you start finding out other things about necromancy, about the fact that there are certain type of people who don't need the protection. I won't show my hand just yet as to what those people are. And I have a plan. When the Necropolis series is supposed to be 5 books long, and before book 5, I'm going to be releasing some short stories, and one of those short stories is going to have all of the facts about necromancy in it. Just how it works, why it works, all of that. Although a lot of that is going to be sort of drip feed revealed throughout the books. But in the current works, you find out that there are 2 types of undead. There are the zombies and ghouls. Zombies are near mindless. I mean, they can still understand speech and follow directions and kind of grunt and half talk, but they're near mindless. And ghouls come back with their full intelligence. And the making of a ghoul is a much more difficult thing than making a zombie, and much more costly, too.
Ah, yes. So they're not exactly common.
Right, exactly. I once again, I don't want to spoiler too many things, but in book 1 of Necropolis, you find out that while the Nazis were certainly defeated, they did leave a bit of a poison pill inside of necromancy to make sure that if they were defeated, they wouldn't go down without a fight, as it were.
Yeah, so sinister and ever nauseous Nazis.
Yes.
No, that sounds like a really, really fun series, actually. But it's got this dark kind of side to it.
Yeah,
obviously, with the noir punk stuff.
Yeah,
not punk. What's the word?
Hard-boiled.
Yeah, hard-boiled. That's the word.
Yeah. Interestingly, when I was first working on the first book, there was a scene in it that went very dark, and I decided to just have it be an implied darkness.
Okay.
And my publisher said, no, we want you to be explicit on this. As things went, they were not the publisher that eventually published the book, but I did write out some rather explicit stuff, and it was a little difficult to write. And but it has stayed in, and it is still in the first book.
Oh boy! I mean, writing something that even you have a hard time looking at, like that's a weird feeling. Like I wrote a short horror story that isn't published anywhere because I can't edit the thing, because I look at it and I'm like, this is just nasty. I don't want to. No, can't look at this for long enough to edit it, and it makes me goofy and weird. I feel weird in the head. Like, oh, this is not good. You should not be here.
There was a short story that I wrote recently that ended up going on another podcast that everyone who read it said, oh, this is really uncomfortable. And I said, yeah, it was really uncomfortable to write too. So in a way, I guess I'm glad that people are getting that reaction to it. So yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, it's funny how, this is the most horrific story I've ever written, and I was like, well, it involved the tongue in certain ways, the human tongue.
Uh-huh.
And it was just so disgusting. I'm like, oh, no way. And it involved plastic surgery as well, by the way. So the two things together made it like, no.
Some nice,
not doing this anymore. And I really wish
body horror.
Yeah, it was definitely body horror. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I like some body horror, but not a lot, not that much, not as much as I put in that story. So whatever, and it'll probably remain forever in the shelf, in the trunk somewhere.
Well, when you get your first, when you get your big, film adaptations of all of your works, someone will be saying, hey, I heard on your podcast all that time ago you have some story about a tongue. We really want to hear it. And you'll be tempted.
I was like, I'll send that to him, but I'm not editing it anymore. I'm never going to look at that story again. Maybe I would. But it's one of those things. Like, I have so many stories that are just sitting in the trunk that I'm like, okay, that one can stay at the bottom. I can leave that one out for now. I don't write a lot of horror. I'm more of a fantasy guy. Yeah.
So I got to ask, do you have the dream that many of us have that one day you're going to get called by Hollywood to get the movie treatment of one of your stories?
Not really. I'm not actually a huge fan of movies anymore.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
I like some movies, but it's more of an exception. Normally, because movies to me are too long and too short at the same time. There's too long of a runtime for one sitting. Mm-hmm. There's not enough story there for a book worth of story in most movies.
I know you can't hear it, but I'm nodding my head.
Yes. It's an interesting medium, but but because the spectacle has to be so high, the kinds of things that get turned into movies that I think are really using the medium, kind of weird. It's a strange thing. It's not weird in like a way that's that's interesting. No, it's weird in a way that's like, well, that's surprisingly boring.
Yeah, I could dig that.
You didn't have enough time to develop the concept most of the time.
Yeah,
and I won't sit for a 3-hour movie. I'd understand. Most of the time, I won't do. I did sit through Lord of the Rings. I enjoyed those when I was younger, but and I did actually watch. I watched up through Endgame for the Marvel universe, but I'm like, okay, the longer these movies get, the less fun they are in some ways. And yet, when they're really short, they come off as kind of shallow. So
okay.
And there's still not that much. I don't know. It's also just a matter of I grew up with books more than movies.
Okay, that's fair.
And so I'm more of a novel kind of character. That's why I like TV series. I still like TV. That's kind of a meeting place for me.
Yeah, I think that a good. I would love to see Necropolis become a television series. That would just amaze me.
Oh, no kidding. So as far as speaking of books and reading and stuff, going back to that a little bit, what have you been reading anything lately that you want to recommend to our readers?
Well,
listeners?
Sort of. I say sort of because one of them is something that I think everyone has read at some point, but every year I do a reread of the entire Earthsea series by Le Guin. And as you can tell, by doing it every year, I like it rather a lot.
No kidding.
It's great fantasy that has sort of a it's not as epic as most of the fantasy you see today, and yet it does have that sort of there's a thread of high levels of power going through it without it being like, the wizard throws a fireball. Well, no, that's not really it. It's about names and secrets and learning. It's about finding out things. And Le Guin's prose has always been a favorite. If you want something a little more recent, The book that I've been rereading once again also is Trader's Blade by Sebastian de Castell, I believe is how it's pronounced.
Yeah. Castiel, yeah.
Yeah. It's a wonderful, wonderful bit of low fantasy swashbuckling with a fantastic plot about this brotherhood and sisterhood called the Greatcoats, which were wandering, swashbuckling bringers of law to this kingdom, and how there was a rebellion, the king got killed, and the king told all the Greatcoats, just let them kill me. Just let them kill me. I have a special mission for each of you to perform. And, you won't be backed by the crown anymore, but you have to keep giving law to the people, and you have to do this mission for me. And it's a fantastic series of books. I will admit I've only read the first 2. I am waiting for my delivery of book 3, but it's a great series, and I highly recommend it.
Oh, 2 good recommendations, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I actually don't have any new recommendations this week because I've been swamped in reading my own my own book, which is Shadow Prince, which is currently in edits, and the pre-order got canceled, unfortunately, for those people who haven't already noticed that. And by the time this episode goes out, the book probably is out because this book's coming out a few weeks later, and I'm gonna get the book out as soon as I can, but it may be a while, like a couple weeks, not a couple days, like I originally hoped.
I'm sure it's worth waiting for.
Oh, you have no idea, but it's a big fantasy book. I mean, not as big as the first book in the series, which is Demon Scroll, which came out in September. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we'll just roll in organically, not biologically. We'll roll organically into the plugs for the episode, because I just did a couple of mine. So, James, where can we find your books?
Okay. You can find them on Amazon. The first book is simply called Necropolis. You'll probably want to add my name, Silverstein, in there, because there's lots of books called Necropolis. The second book is called The Case of the Scarlet Starlet, which, of course, is a more unique, title. You won't have to put my name in for that.
All right. Well, great. And it's been a lot of fun having you on the show, James.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. This was great.
It's always good to chat with authors and friends and people that I don't know yet, that I haven't chatted with in a while. It all works out. Yeah. And it's a good time. So thanks for being on the show, and thanks for listening, everybody. As for us, you can find more of us at mentalcellarpublications.com. You can find all my books on amazon.com, and that includes Demon Scroll and hopefully Shadow Prince. And by this point, and also, I've got series upon series out there. I got three other series: Ten Liars, Pillar Universe, Court Mage. Well, no, Court Mage is the name of the first book, but you get the idea. Take a look, folks, and have a good one. See you next week. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
That tears it.